one. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And good. Donna, take it away.
Okay, good evening to the OSEC meeting on November 30th. This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by the California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconferencing rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and committee meeting members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee using exclusively remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item listed on the agenda. Public meeting videos. Members of the public may view the Open Space and Ecology Committee meeting by logging into the Zoom meeting listed below. Open Space and Ecology meetings can also be viewed live and or on demand via the city's YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/BrisbaneCA or on Comcast channel 27. Archived videos can be replayed on the city's website, brisbaneca.org/meeting. To address the committee, the Open Space and Ecology Committee, OSEC meeting will be an exclusively virtual meeting. The OSEC agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbane.ca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. Remote public comment. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from commenting while in the Zoom meeting, the following email and text lines will also be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be read into the record during oral communications or during an item. Email at aetherton@brisbaneca.org. Join the Brisbane meeting at www.brisbane.ca.org/Zoom-OSEC. Meeting ID 976-4295-0160, passcode 544511. The call-in number is 669-900-9128. Special assistance. If you would need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact Adrian Etherton at aetherton@brisbaneca.org or 415-508-2118. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. I am going to call the meeting to order. All right. Jason Noonan.
Here.
Michelle Salmon.
Here.
Mary Rogers.
Here.
Aaron Becker.
Here.
Barbara Ebel. And Shauna Calmes is here. Missing is Glenn. All right. Who would like to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda. Beat you to it, Mary.
I second.
Great. We have adopted the all right. Are there any announcements?
We need to actually vote on it.
Okay. Sorry.
Can we do an all in favor?
Jason Noonan.
Yeah.
Michelle Salmon.
Aye.
Mary Rogers.
Aye.
Aaron Becker.
Aye.
Barbara Ebel. Shauna Calmes. The agenda has been adopted. Now for some announcements. Anybody have any announcements?
Oh, actually, I guess I have an announcement.
Okay.
I am organizing a tour of the South San Francisco scavenger facility with Teresa, who presented to us maybe a few meetings ago, I think in maybe September. I organized it for my graduate program, but if anyone would like to join us, feel free to send me an email and I can add you to our list.
When is it?
It's this Thursday at 2 p.m.
So
If you've never done it, I highly recommend it. It is an eye opener.
I wanted to do it, but I'm working this Thursday. Next week I'm off, but this week I'm working.
When is it again?
It's this Thursday at 2 p.m.
Tomorrow.
Oh, okay. I'm
Oh,
totally
does that
mistaken. It's next Thursday. It's December 8th.
yay. All right.
It is very worthwhile to go see their operation. It's incredible.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Are there any oral communications?
I have not received any communication. And I don't see any members of the public.
Well, then we would like to look at the approval of minute of last month's meeting. I guess it was a little more than a month ago. And does anybody have any objections to voting on that?
Move to approve.
Second,
Jason Nunez,
Present here. Yes.
Michelle Salmon,
yes.
Mary Rogers,
I wasn't here last month, so I have to excuse myself.
Aaron Becker,
Approve.
Barbara Ebel, Barbara, I approve. Donna Calmes approves.
And for the minutes, was that Michelle made the motion and Jason seconded? Is
Other
that
way
correct?
around.
Other way around. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry. Okay.
I think Barbara. Not hearing me or something? We can't hear you, Barbara. I'm not muted.
We can hear you, but it sounds like you're very far away from the microphone or something.
I'm like inches from my tablet.
That's much
Now we
better
can
though.
hear you.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna quickly introduce this item. I'm gonna go ahead and stop share. Julia, I assume you have slides to share. I think you have slides to share. We asked Senior Planner Julia Ayres, who I think most of you know, to come give us a little bit of an informational overview on CEQA and the entitlement process, because there have been some questions that came up about discussing projects that may be in the works but have not yet been submitted. And we know we have some new committee members. So we thought kind of having a little bit of an overview of this process might be a good idea. And seemed like we had a little bit of space on our agenda to accommodate it this month. So I will go ahead and just pass it to Julia. Thanks, Julia, for agreeing to meet with us and do this. And I think you should have the ability to share screen yourself, but let me know if not.
I do, and
Okay.
There we go. Sorry to disappoint everyone, but I don't have a long slideshow. I will have a visual aid or two. And then some resources at the end that we can look at together if you want. But anyways, nice to meet everyone who I don't already know. I'm Senior Planner Julia Ayres. I've been with the city since making any decision on a project or activity that will have environmental impacts that can't be mitigated. Cities have to say, well, if we're going to approve this project, here's why that's warranted despite those environmental impacts. So again, a landmark law that's really all about public disclosure and incorporation of environmental considerations into the land use and development process. So the CEQA itself, the statute, lives in the California Public Resources Code. There are also implementing guidelines that live in the Code of Regulations. There's another, so the California Office of Planning, OPR, has some really great resources online. You can check out the guidelines. There's a lot of really great PDFs kind of walking through just again, like the basic process, and I'll plug that at the end. CEQA is of course entwined with the land use entitlement process carried out by cities for new development. So entitlement permits are basically permits that are granted to entitle a project to be built, to get a building permit and actually get constructed. So examples of these are like a design permit or a specific plan, for example. Those are entitlement permits that the city processes, that the city uses its discretion to approve or deny those projects, and discretion is key to applicability of CEQA to a project. So land use entitlement processing review is governed by another state statute called the Permit Streamlining Act. As you can probably gauge from the name, the regulations in the Permit Streamlining Act are intended to set time limits on cities in terms of how they can process applications. Yes, Michelle. You're muted.
Can you slow down just a little bit, Julia? You talk really freaking really fast.
Sorry about that. I can
Take a
slow down
breath.
and I can also give you resources so you don't have to write down like everything I say.
Yeah, but some of the stuff
I'll
you're
go
saying is
slower.
really, I've been through the process, but there's some key things that you're saying that I really want to focus on. So you could slow down just a tiny bit. That'd be great.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
problem. As you can tell, this is my passion. So again, so Permit Streamlining Act basically sets limits on jurisdictions, on cities. When they get a planning application, an entitlement application, we have a set amount of time to review that application. That's all tied to environmental review under CEQA as well. So both CEQA, Permit Streamlining Act work together to basically govern any major development project that's submitted to the city for consideration. Okay. So here's where I'll pull up my visual aid. So basically a project gets submitted to the city, an application gets submitted to the city. What next? So what I've thrown up here is a nice, simple CEQA process flowchart. And I can enlarge this if that helps. And I'm not going to like narrate exactly the process in this, but I just think it's a helpful reference as I walk through the whole process. So as soon as my department, the community development department, receives an entitlement application like a design permit or like a specific plan, the Permit Streamlining Act kicks in and it says basically planning staff has 30 days from submittal of that application to review it for completeness. Does it have all of the required elements that the city has set out and published? It has to be on our website and accessible. These aren't secret requirements. Does it have all of the mandatory items that we require to process? So completeness is a pretty important stage. Just internally, obviously planning, we would review a application internally. We distribute it to every department in the city. We would also, for large scale projects, likely be distributing it to countywide agencies that have some sort of jurisdiction, whether there be, issuing a permit down the line for some sort of component of the project, or have some other sort of responsibility for part of the project. Also state agencies, if there are any state agencies that are either issuing permits or are going to have some sort of review and intersection with the project approval process. So the 30-day window for completeness is triggered once we get an application. Once we go through that process, once we determine, okay, we have everything we need, the application is complete. Once that determination of completeness comes through, that starts another important clock in terms of we need to decide, are we going to prepare an environmental document for this project or not? Is this project exempt from CEQA? If it's exempt, carry on our way, no further action required. However, we're in the world tonight of these are bigger projects. So yes, if an EIR is required, there are certain time limits that kick in that essentially are from that completeness date. So for example, we have 30 days, sometimes 45, can get into the distinction of when that occurs from the day we say this application is complete to decide whether or not we're preparing an environmental impact report or another type of document called a negative declaration. And I can go into the differences between those two if we're interested. And then there's certain other actions that are kind of dominoing from that decision as well. I think probably the most important thing to think about tonight is basically we have a year from the time we determine an application to be complete to actually complete and certify the EIR. It's not, it sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not. And there are some provisions for potentially extending that with agreement of the applicant, but about a year. And then the agency has to actually act on the project, approve or deny the project itself within 6 months from certifying the EIR. So yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Can you just, I don't need a whole thing, but a brief difference between negative declaration and EIR.
Sure. So an EIR or environmental impact report is always going to be required when a project has the potential to have a significant impact on the environment. So the negative declaration is basically, we've studied this and we are declaring that there is no impact on the environment. Oftentimes you'll see a mitigated negative declaration, which says basically, because we've proposed these mitigations, the project will have no impact on the environment or less than significant impact on the environment.
Got it. Thanks. And the city decides this. It's not, you just look at it and say, okay, this is not going to, we decide this is not going to have any impact. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's obviously an evaluation that has to occur. That is, frankly, for larger projects, the city's always going to hire an environmental consultant to complete that evaluation. The consultant works for the city, not the developer. But yeah, almost always, yeah, there's a third party who's actually preparing the environmental document, whether it's a negative declaration or an environmental impact report, EIR.
And Julia, oh, sorry, Erin, you had your hand up.
No, Michelle, I put it up when you started speaking. So go ahead. You're probably asking the same question I am.
And what if what if people do not agree with the negative declaration with mitigations? Then what is the recourse for the public?
So if the city goes with a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration, and someone in the public disagrees, that I'll just say it's very rare that you're going to see a negative declaration without any mitigations.
What about a negative declaration with mitigations?
Right. So mitigated negative declarations, yeah, they're more common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So CEQA is a public disclosure law. CEQA also is often used by the public to litigate against projects if there's a reasonable argument to be made that there is going to be a significant impact to the environment that someone in the public feels has not been addressed in negative declaration, and that member of the public has brought it up during the process, and it didn't go anywhere, then usually you're going to see litigation, whether it's an EIR or mitigated negative declaration.
Okay, thank you.
Public engagement is a key part of the CEQA process. So as we can kind of talk about, there are many opportunities that the public has to get engaged in the process and share their concerns, areas of study that they think the environmental document needs to address. All that sort of thing is kind of key to having the public engaged from the beginning of the process.
Such as the notice of preparation.
That's right, which I can go over
Okay.
next. Erin, did you still have something, or are you?
I did. It's a quick one. Who pays for all of this work that the city puts into these reviews and disclosures?
The developer, but the developer is not paying the consultant. So basically the city hires a consultant, typically, especially for a larger process, we're going to issue a request for proposals and have multiple bids submitted. And the consultant will be selected through that process, contract will be signed, and we collect payment from the developer and use that to pay the consultant. So with the city being the middle person, we are the client. We're basically billing the developer, but we are the client and the consultant works for us. But no public funds are expended related to the consultant contract.
Thank you.
Okay. So sorry, I kind of jumped us forward. Now I'm going to reel a little bit back. So we have this application. We've determined that we're going to prepare an EIR. This project has the potential to have a significant impact on the environment. So CEQA says we have to prepare an EIR. So we are at this point skimming right past here.
What's a ministerial project?
A ministerial project is one which we are not talking about tonight, but basically a ministerial project is a project that requires no discretion on the city's part in their action on it. In Brisbane, an example of that is a building permit. If you apply for a building permit and everything in your building permit proposal complies with the building code, complies with planning and zoning, doesn't trigger like a design permit or any discretionary action, the city, there's no debate. It's either yes, you check all these boxes, here's your permit, or no, you don't check these boxes, you don't get a permit. That's a ministerial type of action. A discretionary, and CEQA does not apply to ministerial actions. CEQA applies to discretionary actions or actions where the city can say, we could approve it, let's consider its merit, or we could deny it. Obviously, we have findings and we don't just capriciously make decisions to approve or deny discretionary applications. But that's the difference. Ministerial is we have no choice. It's if they're meeting all these criteria, it gets approved or issued. Discretionary is, well, we have discretion. We can look at the merits of an application and go one way or the other. And CEQA is a discretionary, it applies to discretionary decisions. Okay, so we have a discretionary project. It's going to require an EIR. So we have to tell everybody that we're going to prepare an EIR. So the city or our consultants usually will prepare a notice of preparation that has project information, says we're going to we're going to be drafting an EIR, and invites comments from the public, from other state agencies, county agencies. This is something that's distributed, to far and wide, essentially. Has a deadline for folks to basically submit their comments. This is used for something that's called scoping. So literally what's the scope of our study? What areas do members of the public or these different agencies think, absolutely need to be focused on in our review? So that notice of preparation gets sent out. There is a timing attached to the notice of preparation as well. That typically is about a 30-day process for people to submit their comments. While not required, it is also pretty standard, at least in Brisbane and most cities, to hold a scoping meeting during that window of time. So in addition to letting people send in written comments, the scoping meeting is in person or virtual these days for folks to come in and address the consultants and the city staff with their items of concern. Okay, so we're saying, everyone, we're preparing an EIR. Yes, Michelle.
So what happens if the developer changes the project after the NOP period has closed?
Then we will reissue the NOP with a updated project description, a brand new 30-day period for comments to be submitted. It starts that again.
Okay. And the original comments would still be retained?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we've told everyone we're preparing it. So now we actually prepare it. So again, this is typically done by an environmental consulting firm. They'll do various technical studies. You know, for most large scale projects, we're looking at biological assessments, traffic and circulation analyses, all types of technical kind of data collection on the project impacts that would occur. They also, the EIR is always going to have also baseline conditions. So what are things like before the project is even built? Let's establish our baseline. And then what will the project do to all these baseline conditions? What is the impact? So that work is all ongoing. And most of the time that starts even, you know, simultaneously with the notice of preparation and even like before. A lot of that kind of ground level work just starts moving forward because again, we have that really tight window of when we have to complete and certify the EIR. So we collect all the scoping comments during the scoping period from the notice of preparation. We are hard at work preparing an EIR. We have a draft ready, great. We're going to publish a draft EIR. So basically, once the draft EIR is ready for public viewing after going through some administrative review internally, published, we also then circulate a notice of completion that tells everybody that we had already notified we were preparing one that, hey, we finished it. It's available for review. That starts a public review period. The public review period for draft EIRs that have to go under review by state agencies, which in Brisbane, I think most of our bigger projects, that's the case for those. There's a minimum 45-day period. Let me just double check that. Yeah, 45 days minimum for public review of a draft EIR. CEQA law says no more than 60 days unless there are special circumstances. So I don't know how engaged everyone was with some of our past planning projects. You may notice that, you know, for example, the draft EIR for the Baylands had a really long public review period. So again, this is kind of where CEQA and the Permit Streamlining Act, they're kind of encouraging cities to do your due diligence and do your evaluation, but try to kind of streamline the process. But there's a provision, as we've already exercised in past projects, to extend that period if it's absolutely necessary. But anyway, 45 to 60 days to review a draft EIR for standard projects. Once the public comment period's closed, the city has to consider all comments that were submitted and potentially make revisions to the draft EIR if warranted. And those responses to comments and any revisions to the draft EIR, those would all be packaged into a final EIR. So if I can scroll, where are we now? We are here. Lead agency prepares final EIR, including responses to comments on the draft. So once we have a final EIR, the lead agency or the city has to certify it. Yes, Michelle.
Sorry to have so many questions, but I've been through this process a few times and I've always wondered about these things. So once you have a final EIR, what if there, is it again a litigation issue if a group of people or people don't agree with the answers to the comments were sufficient? Then what happens?
It's a great question. I wish I was a CEQA land use attorney and could give you a super fast answer. I would defer basically I can research that a little bit more and get back to you, but generally, if the members of the public have been, again, communicating their concerns throughout the whole process, it's all in the record. And, you know, the city has a final EIR and moves to certify that EIR without in that, the member of the public's mind adequately addressing as CEQA requires the issue they're concerned with, then yes, one of the recourses, if the person wanted to pursue that or the organization, would be to sue and say that, hey, you certified a final EIR and said it was in substantial compliance with CEQA, and we disagree because we've been saying this whole time that blah, blah, blah.
Okay, thank you.
But I am not a lawyer, so.
Well, that alone was the answer.
Unfortunately, with CEQA, or fortunately, depending on what side of a particular issue you're on, litigation seems to me to often be where interpretations of CEQA are clarified. Like, there's so much case law. I mean, those of you that know, like, there's CEQA, there's the CEQA guidelines, and then there's like CEQA case law, and it's both documents are very thick and have equal pull on how we apply CEQA today. Jason, I see your hand.
I got lost here. What's the difference between responsible agency and lead agency? What is that again?
Lead agency is going to be the agency preparing the EIR. So in the context of our conversation tonight, the City of Brisbane is the lead agency for, the larger projects that we have coming up that we're trying to give you guys that context for. A responsible agency is another public agency that has some sort of permitting power. Well, there's, responsible and trustee agencies. Let me make sure I'm telling you the right one.
Like,
they also have a permit that they'd be issuing later down the line.
County or state or something like that, or
yeah. So, like, let's see. Here's a good example. The Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC. It's a public agency. They regulate development within 100 feet of the shoreline band. So, like, anything that goes out at Sierra Point. Sierra Point is in the City of Brisbane's jurisdiction. We would process the design permit, but BCDC would have to issue their own permit to allow whatever development's occurring within their area of jurisdiction to move forward. So they're a responsible agency. They're not necessarily making the land use approval, but they're issuing a permit so they're considered like a responsible agency for some projects.
And also like the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Or State Department of Toxic Substances Control.
Yep. DTSC.
Yep, which I know many of you are very intimately aware of. Okay. All right. So tried to get us down to, we have a final EIR that has responded to all the comments submitted. So, and as if needed, provided revisions or additional information. Although not too much additional information, because that might trigger a supplemental EIR, but we're not going to get too far in the weeds on that. So the city decision-making body, which could be the Planning Commission if there are no legislative actions requested, or it could be the City Council if, like, say there's a zoning text amendment, since the council has to act on that. The council's on the decision-making body, but it is possible, infrequently, but it is possible for planning commissions to actually be the decision-making bodies. Anyway, decision-making body says, great, we think this complies with CEQA, we're going to certify this final EIR. So they make that action. There are certain notices that we would then file to tell everybody we certified the final EIR. And at that point, we then move on to actually acting on the land use entitlements. So bringing in again that involvement, or that relationship between CEQA and also the Permit Streamlining Act. We have to act on the project itself, approve or deny the design permit or the specific plan or whatever, within 6 months from certifying the EIR. Oftentimes, I'll go ahead and stop. Or not oftentimes, sometimes those actions occur simultaneously, and that's really at the discretion of the jurisdiction. So you might have the final EIR certification and the entitlement approval occur at the same public hearing on the same agenda as part of the same slate of applications. All right. kind of almost at the end. Okay, the last section I'll just talk about is who is involved in the process. So under the Permit Streamlining Act and CEQA, the main actors in the entitlement and environmental review process are one, the decision-making body, which again is the body of the city, either in our case, the commission or the city council, who are making those land use approvals on the application. They also would make the final certification of the EIR. Any advisory bodies, so in an application that does actually require final approval by council, which a lot of larger projects do, general plan amendments or zoning text. Again, CEQA is all about involving members of the public, and since its inception has been wielded by the public for the public good. And we love that. At that point, or at this point, I'll stop. And if there are any other questions, happy to entertain them. I can also briefly walk you through some of the resources online if you kind of want to dig in deeper at the chair's pleasure.
I have a question.
Yes, Michelle.
So once the entitlements are granted, do they expire because the circumstances, over time change on a environmental impact report, or, is there like an expiration date on that, or are they just, once they have the entitlements, they're good till hell freezes over?
So there's kind of two facets to that. So I'll just take your question on its face. Do entitlement permits expire? The simple answer to that is yes. So in our code, well, sorry, that's not a simple answer.
There's no
some of them do.
Answer.
Some of them do. Some of them do not. Legislative actions do not expire. So if the city processes a zoning amendment and adopts it by ordinance, we've amended our zoning. That doesn't go away. But if someone applies for a design permit and allows that design permit to expire at the end of the 2-year, the design permit is valid for 2 years. It can be extended by up to 3 years for a total of 5 years. Anyways, that's an example of entitlement permit that would expire. But then I think you're kind of also asking if environmental review expires, right? Or like if environmental review is always kind of set in stone. So, and that's also kind of complicated and depends on the context, but I'll just say generally, like, yes, there's kind of a kind of logical conclusion that has to be part of a CEQA process for a project. Well, if it's entitled and it has an EIR and it's built within the entitlement period, then there's no revisiting the EIR, if that makes sense.
Yes, but
Okay.
if it's not built.
If it's not built. If it's not built ever, then the entitlements expire. We're in the world of like a design permit kind of situation, right? Normally, then no, you couldn't just like reapply. You couldn't apply for like a building permit for a project with expired design permits. The city would say, no, you need a new design permit. And then at that time, we'd also say, since we have to apply CEQA, can we use an old EIR? Maybe, but that's a decision the city has to make. And depending on the age of that EIR, maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe there's a need to prepare a new environmental document, but that kind of is all context in that interim period. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess the other question is what happens when I'll cite a specific example, such as the Baylands, who didn't have a specific design permit with their EIR. That it was I don't remember what it was called. I'm sorry. There's 6,000 pages of it. So how long do they have before they need to begin construction before that EIR expires or needs to be revisited? I mean, that's kind of a real circumstance. I don't want you to speak about a real circumstance, but I'm citing that as an example so you can make up a fake circumstance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will do my best. And again, I am happy to follow up with
Mhm.
a little more information, because I think probably the community development director would definitely want to put his spin on this. But basically, if an action for a general plan amendment, say if there's a general plan amendment that the city was considering, and there's environmental review that was completed in association with that general plan amendment, we adopt the general plan amendment, we reference the EIR that we certified. Okay, that's the action. So the general plan has been amended. If there is a project submitted down the line that's, say a specific plan that's consistent with a general plan amendment, the city would, like I kind of said before, we're going to say like, okay, well, CEQA applies. So what are we going to do? Are we going to rely on an old EIR or a previous EIR? Okay, is there one? There is. Okay, well, let's think about all those things that you had brought up, Michelle. Are there changed circumstances, or are there, how valid is that EIR? And that's a decision that the city makes. There's no, like I said, there's no like expiration period on an EIR. Okay, it's all kind of at the judgment of the city under thoughtful consideration. It's not a capricious decision. Because as we're talking about, litigation and CEQA go hand in hand. So the city's always going to make a really careful and considered and informed decision on that.
Adrian, go home.
No, no.
Bye.
She got the circle of boredom going.
Okay.
I don't know
Circle
what's
of death by boredom.
Sorry,
The
there's
Chinese
a lot of
protest?
things open to run one of these meetings, guys.
The Chinese
So
protest,
my
the
computer's
white card?
struggling with it right now.
I read today that Mercury is in opposition to Mars, so that's probably why.
All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Closing a few other windows. Trying to see if we can get Microsoft to want to share this document.
I think we should requisition Adrian a stronger computer and a better internet.
I don't know if it's the internet or just that I've got too many things running.
I always blame it on sunspot activity.
Pretty dark out right now.
Sunspot
Just a
stuff.
detail, Adrian. Come on.
I'll admit I loved having that 30 seconds to go boil some water for tea.
All right, one of these days I'm gonna reboot, and I guess, have you all had a chance to look at it? It was attached to your agenda and posted with the agenda. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at it and maybe have some
Yes.
initial comments while I get the document open.
So are we talking about who will do what again, or are we just reviewing?
We are just reviewing our proposed work plan for 2023.
Did you have any
I did
comments, Erin?
I do. Now I've got to listen to the tea boiling in the background. I remember last year's council meeting when we went to them and we said, this is our work plan. And they very clearly said, there's way too much stuff on your work plan. And after being on OSEC for a year, I agree. There's too much stuff on our work plan. And I brought this up last time, and Michelle, I totally understand your opinion that all of this stuff is important. And if it's not on the work plan, it's not going to get done. So I'm going to suggest that we possibly bin the work plan into priorities, or say, these are things that we want to put back on the work plan next year, but they're going to be dormant this year. I think we are trying to bite off more than we can chew, and I think that we should focus our efforts. And with that, I will lead the floor to discussion.
My comment on that is, it seems like parts of our work plan have been worked on really diligently, and they're either sitting with staff or with council waiting for something to happen, and we can't clear them off of our work plan. I mean, how long has dark skies been sitting there and then now it's has to do it? That's just my,
Yeah, I mean, can you guys hear me this time?
yes.
Yeah, I heartily disagree because we actually get busted if we work on something that isn't on the work plan. And we can have all these things on our work plan, acknowledge that we're not going to work on all of them, set our priorities, ignore the other things. But if something comes up and we want to work on the other stuff, then we get in trouble. And I think that's kind of pedantic, but that's the way it goes.
Jason?
Yeah, I kind of feel a lot. I mean, I've only been on here a couple years, but I kind of feel strongly that with Erin, that it's just so sprawling and that it's hard to get us all together. I need to understand what Barbara is saying. If she's saying that just having things on there makes it allowable for us to work on it, but it's just so sprawling that there's a lot of things that aren't getting done, and we all have lives, and the staff has a lot to do. So there's just so much stuff that it seems not attainable. And if the council themselves is saying your work plan is too big, I think we should take that a little bit seriously.
I will say this. There are now 6 acres parcels that are priority preservation area that weren't. And that was on our work plan for multiple years. But because it stayed on the work plan, we didn't let it drop. We stayed on it and we finally got it done. Even though we were like done a year ago, we just didn't get it in front of council. And so there is value for having things on our work plan, and the priority shifts based on the interests of the committee and the interests of the council. And having it there means that we're not forgetting it. Dark skies has been on the work plan since I started OSEC, well, like 11 years ago or however long it is. And it's finally surfaced to the top in the priority level. I mean, I lost 2 years doing the EIR for the Baylands, which hasn't gone anywhere yet. So there is value in it. And Aaron, I hear what you're saying, but I'm looking at the long game. And it seems like we never, but we get so much done eventually on our work plan that I don't want to give anything up. Some stuff is like, okay. Other stuff though, the long thought ones, like updating the open space and ecology plan, the invasive species ordinance, the dark skies ordinance, the tree issues. Those are things that are close to my heart. Those are things that I want to devote time to as we can. And I don't want to let them go. Because when we let them go, then I'm, you understand where I'm at. I don't need to pontificate.
Mary?
I guess my suggestion would be to keep everything on the work plan and then just prioritize accordingly. The old saying, out of sight, out of mind. I don't want these things to be forgotten. So I'm advocating to keep everything on the list and then prioritize.
I would second what Mary just said, that if we all understand that some things just aren't going to be done or even possibly touched, I'm cool with that. But I mean, it's frustrating to me to look at this massive list and know that some things aren't going to be touched. So if we could actually vocalize what our focus is, what we're going to go for, I would love to keep pushing for the invasive species. We got some action with the parcels, and really I'll get behind it and lean in if need be. And certainly Erin did an enormous amount of work, but there's just so many. I don't know how, realistically we're all going to get that on. If we understand that some are high priority and others are there as placeholders that we're going to come back to. I'm cool with that.
If you have a passion about something, then it's going to move up in priority. And that's what happened with dark skies. That's what's happening right now with invasive species. you know, other things are going to fall by the wayside, like the holiday tree. You know, I mean, and there are some things that we just do as a community outreach, like a bike to work day. I have like zero interest in that, but other people do. Day in the park, I do have an interest in because it's kind
Anybody
of
else bike to
traditional.
work day? Because I don't. Anybody else bike to work day? Is that big? Or because maybe that could go because I don't care either. Anybody else care?
Yeah, that was mine, and I used to head that up. Except we haven't had a bike to work day because of COVID. It is 1/2 day out of the year, you know, and I just like it on there so that it's on our calendar and it's on our radar, and we don't go like, "Hey, when's bike to work day?" Oh, that was last month. Oop.
I totally get that, and I appreciate that, Barbara. And you know, so it's hard to let things go because they come up, and we work them as they come up.
That is the nature of government sprawl. People make committees and they never dissolve them. We're just not doing bike to work day and nobody has time for it. So let's put it on there when we have time for it. Right now, let's let it go. Unless, Barbara, you're willing to do it. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to do it, except it hasn't actually even been held due to COVID. It's not that I'm not doing it; it's just hasn't been held because of COVID.
Why don't we put it on when they hold it? But right now, it's just this massive sprawl, you know? So it's just kind of there from inertia and that we like looking at it. But, take it off. When it comes back, we'll put it back on, you know?
Okay. As long as Adrian or somebody is out there watching for it to come back, put it back on, that's fine.
So I think it's helpful to note that some of these things are not things that really have that much committee involvement, but they're kind of sponsors of Bike to Work Day, and is, you know, one example. The Park and Rec staff actually really does the majority of the work for that, at least since I've been with the city. That's been my understanding. Sometimes OSEC members like Barbara or, you know, myself or Karen have helped out that day, but, you know, it's really, you know, kind of something that we want to see happen and we want to promote, but it's not really a big time investment. And I think there's, you know, perhaps some other things on here that are also more, you know, kind of routine kind of things that aren't necessarily big time investments. So one suggestion that I might have in kind of thinking about how we structure this to prioritize and indicate might be, rather than having these categories of policy issues and habitat restoration, having kind of a priority project, and then kind of, you know, continuing or routine things. You know, we're going to have the vegetation management plan for the acres and outreach to the owners as an ongoing thing, but it's not something that takes a huge investment of committee members' time. And then we can have another bucket that could be, you know, kind of when the opportunity arises. There's probably a better category name for that, but some of these things like general plan or 2030 climate action plan update, we can't work on them until some other plan or project or, you know, milestone is hit somewhere else in the city. And so it's just kind of been on the work plan as if this thing happens, then we'll get started working on that. So we could, you know, have that as a separate bucket at the bottom so we don't lose sight of those things, or if that trigger happens in that year, we can start working on it. But I think that might help to really kind of structure this in a way that gives more clarity to what we're actively working on as kind of our priority project.
So to declutter then, Adrian, and is there any other one that you'd suggest would fit into that, like the bike to work, that we can roll back in when it's at such a time? Is there another one that you'd recommend?
I think Karen had something to say.
Oh yeah, I was going to say these ones that Adrian mentioned, climate action plan update and general plan review, or something like that. Those are going to take a lot of time if they come up. So it is a little challenging to know we can do these 4 things in the next 12 months, because one of those may come up and it may take a significant amount of time. which I'm sorry, not helping getting this, moving this forward, but I think, yeah, there are a few, big meaty things that the committee thinks are a priority, and maybe that's priority projects, and then there's, like Adrian said, routine, and then there's, ad hoc as they come up. Maybe that would
Ultimately,
help focus
ultimately,
work.
ultimately, I was just going to say, Karen, I hear you. And ultimately, we work for the city council. And so, for example, when I started Open Space and Ecology, my first 2 years were really sucked up by the draft EIR for the Baylands. And once that was completed, we started working on the things that were passion things for me and other people. And I understand that. So it's a constantly shifting environment, and having these things on our list, it doesn't mean that we're expected to accomplish every single one of them in 2023. It just means that these are things that we are paying attention to, that we're working on an as needed, time sensitive basis and a priority basis. But based on the conversation we had earlier with Julia, I feel like there's a couple of things coming down the pike that we are going to be tasked with by the city council. And when that happens, we will make room for it, because that will take priority over the things that each of us have a passion for.
Glenn?
I was going to suggest that maybe Adrian. No, I'm not. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. I was just going to suggest that maybe Adrian could draft a work plan with the sort that she suggested, and we could review it at our next meeting. I tend to lean toward wanting to keep stuff on the list so that we're watching it, but I like the idea of routine stuff, special projects, and maybe possibilities that we have to look out for. EIR reviews and things like that. If maybe Adrian could draft something and show it next meeting, I would be happy with that.
Agree.
Agreed.
I would second that with what Glenn just said. I would absolutely second that. And if Adrian had the time for that, that'd be awesome. And to Michelle's point, if ultimately we work for city council and they're telling us your work plan's too big, then we should listen to them when they say the work plan's too big. And maybe we put an active column on the top and a little bucket at the bottom and say, yes, this is something we're looking at, but we're not actively working on. So I would second what was just said here, priority.
So I'm going to ask two things as we wrap up, so I have good direction. First off, Karen, can you scroll down a little bit? I want to make sure everybody's gotten a look at the bottom of the list, if there's anything left. Okay, so just 6 was the only thing that was not showing before. Is there anything on this current list that folks do not think need to be moved forward at all, and anything that can go entirely?
I can't really see it because I'm on my phone and the type is way too small. So I'll just bow out of this part.
Let me see if I can
quickly read it for you. Read it if we want to do that.
I guess let's put it this way. If you have any additional suggestions in that regard, maybe send them to me in the next month or so, because we do have until late January before our next meeting. So we will have a little bit of time for additional comments and suggestions. And I will put this forth in the January meeting. And if there's anything that someone suggests that didn't get kind of, multiple recommendations, it can be listed as tentative for the group to approve at that January meeting. Yeah, my other question would just be to confirm the priorities.
Right.
Yes.
I wanted to add, well, what was said before is the council, I think, is looking at the subject matter and commenting on it, and they're getting informed about what we're working on. I don't think that they look at it through the lens of like, how much can you accomplish in 12 months? Because I don't think that they're looking at what else staff is doing and how much time committee members put, they're, as policymakers, they're kind of not quantifying stuff that way. They're probably looking at staff to say, well, this is how much we think we can do of everything on this list. So, in that sense, it's kind of like the goals more than it is what we think we're going to do in 12 months.
I look at this and think what we're going to do in 5 years.
Yeah.
So Adrian's question was, is there anything that's not on the list? And then what are the top priorities? I mean,
are we really going to get involved with the conversion of small off-road engines? Is that something for our committee to be involved with?
That's my sacred cow. I've been trying to look at that for 10 years. And if we had looked at it somewhere in the past 10 years, we'd probably find that we weren't going to do very much. But until we can actually look at it, I am not willing to put that one to bed. I think that would be very easy to put to bed, but it needs to be looked, for me, it needs to be just looked at.
Well, we talked about it, but then I don't know what happened. We talked about it for a hot second, and then we said, oh, the electric are louder than the gas, or just as loud, and they're not. But I don't know what we can do with that.
I think, as I recall, we were waiting for, there was going to be something coming down the pike on the state level, which I believe there was. And
There is.
we didn't want to get into the weeds with it because the lawyers, the city lawyers, were going to have to look at all that before we could do anything anyway.
Well,
So-
Barbara,
Yeah,
why don't we just take that off and we'll put it back when something comes along,
Jason, I'd like to update your phrasing, not take it off, just lower it on the priority.
Deprioritize.
Right.
That's fine. I'm fine with deprioritizing it.
So I will say this is one that I wondered if it could be cut entirely because the state has passed a law that requires any of these devices sold starting in January 2024 to be electric. So it's kind of like if we don't do anything in the next year, which seems unlikely given our other priority projects or things that I'm assuming are higher priority. Not sure what exactly we're going to do in that kind of time frame, but
It says support the conversion. That could be as easy as education and outreach, which we have done some of.
It says education and outreach.
Yeah.
So it's not that it needs to go away. I mean, certainly if it gets stalled out for another 10 years, it probably will become irrelevant. But I'm
Do we
really
have to
hoping
wait-
that's not
Do
going
we
to happen.
have to wait 10 years? Really?
Well-
it's being.
Jason, we have waited on some of these things and they've fallen off. Like, look, there's nothing about plastic bags. There's nothing about food containers. Those are gone now,
Mhm.
Right, and the
They
leaf
probably
blowers will be gone in 1 more year, so it's like,
that's
just let
okay,
it go.
but they're on the list and we
Okay.
participated in the other
Alright.
things.
Okay.
So
Right.
don't stress. Don't
Okay,
stress over
I'm
it.
not stressed. It's just
I
nonsense.
guess my other question would be, we're not listing everything that we're doing education and outreach on this list, and I don't think we need to. So if
Yeah.
all we're doing on an issue is education and outreach, is there a reason it needs to be on the list?
can the CAP subcommittee decide that about leaf blowers at their meeting?
Sure.
What the plan forward is, and then maybe if they decide that there isn't a bigger piece for all of OSEC, then it will come off by the next time all of
Yeah.
OSEC meets.
That's fine, but it's on the list because I've just been pushing for it for 10 years and there's just not been able to make any headway. So
respect that.
that's frustrating for me because it was something I felt very passionate about.
I mean, since it is coming down the pike, is this something that like the people that program the sign can just say, just remind, once a month they put up a thing saying, just to remind you, if your leaf blower, if your gas leaf blower has died, think about getting an electric one.
Yeah,
As
that's a good
simple
start.
as something like that, and that's really
Yeah.
putting it back into the city's court, or the communication person's court, whoever programs.
Or the Education and
Yes.
Outreach Subcommittee.
Yeah, or it goes into the blast, every third week or something like that.
Yeah. So is it also when we have our January meeting, is it time for us to meet with our council liaisons?
We can, the first of the year, so if we feel like we're ready, we can try to schedule it then. Or it would be maybe the next month.
Yeah, maybe February. I mean,
Did we meet with the full committee last time?
They haven't been to see us. They haven't been to meet with us for a while, but it's Colleen and Terry now, I think.
I
And
think
it would
so.
be nice. We haven't actually met with Colleen. So it might be nice to
We
schedule
did
that.
beginning of last year? I thought we did.
I think we had a subcommittee meeting. So it was the liaison and then the chair and vice chair to discuss the work plan. I think is how we did it last
But it'd
year
be
or maybe the
nice-
last couple of years.
It'd be nice
Oh,
to have, and Colleen's changed out with Karen, so it'd be nice to have them come, and say, yeah, we love this. No, you're doing too much. Let's get some feedback from the council since we work for them.
Yeah, well, but I mean, obviously now we take it to council, the full council, to get approval, but this is the first draft to kind of get it somewhere so that staff doesn't bring it and the committee says, oh, well, I wanted something completely different. What did staff come up with? That's why we're talking about it this month.
Yeah, I agree with that. Personally, I think it looks good. And internally, we should prioritize, which happens because of how much interest we have in each item. And, so.
Can we vote on what's on there? Because it seems like there are items that only one person wants, and they're on there because one person feels. I just think we should maybe look at the whole thing. So, there, I'm not stressed.
In terms of what's under priority, that could work.
Yep. Give you a nice idea for the next meeting.
So I mean, like at this point, I would move to approve our work plan.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly approve the work plan. I think Adrian needs to reorganize it, but I think maybe that's something we can do offline as we've had time to think about priorities.
So should I make a motion to overall approve our work plan? Oh, Erin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm so if we approve our work plan, this is what goes to city council, right? So they don't see the priorities and they don't see that we've done anything to streamline our work plan or address their concern that there was too much on it.
Exactly. So if you move for that, I'm going to vote no respectfully, but I think it needs to be fixed before we approve it. So.
And I second that as well. I think if we can look at kind of compartmentalizing some of these items and reprioritizing it, and then we can bring it up for a vote. That's what I'm going to. But I also will not vote for this being sent to the city council system.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right, so it sounds like it'll come back to our next meeting.
Great. Sounds good.
Thank
I'm
you.
okay with the priority thing. I just don't want to rubber stamp it the way it is.
Adrian, do you have good direction on this now?
I think I have clear enough direction. I will probably have to make some, judgment calls for myself on what goes where, and hopefully my computer will cooperate next meeting a little bit better. And if folks want to move things around, we can do that.
Is
Okay.
there any way that you can show us some of the earlier versions of it, and we don't violate the Brown Act as you start to work on it?
If you have conversation, it's not great.
If
You want to send?
if they send comments only to me though, is that okay? Like if you send comments to me between meetings?
Adrian, would it be crazy to ask you to do a survey monkey and have us prioritize, each one of us prioritize
I don't
what
think
we
we
think is
want to
important?
do that off
Okay.
outside of the meeting, I mean,
Okay.
I think I would say I'm getting I mean, from what we've been working on that you guys are priority. I mean, obviously if we vote, it's going to be different, but dark skies, invasive species, vegetation management is like an every year. And trees.
I was gonna say actually
And
the
frogs.
top 3 bullets in the priority list, the frogs and the trees, is what I would assume are the priority item.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it works for me as a draft. I'm not like real sharp tonight because my head feels like somebody's taking a hammer to my sinuses.
And again, those are just the priority list. They're not, the other things aren't dropping off the list. They're just going to be categorized differently.
Yeah,
I
and I
agree
know
with-
Erin has to go in a few minutes, so let's let Adrian do her magic, and then we can.
I think you've
All
pretty
Right,
much
I am
highlighted
stopping
it.
the share. Stopping the share.
Oh no.
Eh.
Thank you, Adrian.
Did we lose Glenn or did I'm
Oh,
seeing
on her phone.
Oh no.
hang on. Participant list. So
Close that so that
hang on. I'm promoting her to panelist. She may be dropped and I didn't notice and she needed to be let back in. I saw a hand, but not a
There she is.
box there. Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Oh, hopefully
Glenn,
she
sorry
didn't
about that.
think
I'm
something
not
different.
sure if you had something else to add or if you were just raising your hand so I noticed that you were
Dropping
the-
off.
stuck on the other side.
Maybe
Um,
struggling with the phone part.
Oh. I'm good. I just raised my hand because I accidentally demoted myself from panelist to something else. So that was all.
Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna see if my screen share wants to cooperate now. Hopefully you guys
Yay.
are seeing slides again. And we will go on to staff
Yes.
updates. I pulled mine up on my phone while everybody was talking since I had to close all my other windows. So my first one was just a reminder for headshots. I think I got most of them in, so we can update the image and the slides. If you haven't sent it yet, I think there's maybe just 1 or 2 of you. Go ahead and send that to me. I've got a new image in the works. Let's see. Sorry, I have an intruder. Not right now, buddy. Okay, sorry about that. SB 1383, we are preparing for enforcement to start in January. So we just sent a final notice to some property owners that currently appear to not be in compliance. Hopefully none of you are going to get that letter. An update from the natural resources, I called natural resources coordinating meeting. I know this will be of interest because it comes up all the time. The county mentioned that there is Cubata grass treatment that sounded imminent, and this meeting was, I think, almost a month ago now, along Radio Road. They listed off a few other locations. I didn't get them all into my notes. Possibly Wax Myrtle Ravine if they're able to get to it, but they are prioritizing areas that are, higher or more in the wind. And then they also are doing oxalis treatment in several areas in the December to February timeframe, plus treatment of gorse, retreatment, I think, of gorse in the Saddle area, spring treatment of fennel, radish, and broom. And then Hannah and Evan and Joseph Perry reported that they passed along taking Levinson as a mitigation site, but hadn't heard anything further about that. So those were some updates from that meeting. On an issue that we discussed, I guess it was last month, the letter to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I went to look into it a little further after the fact, and it turned out that the board had already adopted an order on October 12th on the issue that Dana Dilworth's letter was addressing. So I reached out to Glenn. It doesn't seem to make sense for us to move forward with that letter, considering they've already made a decision on that issue. If you are interested, you can see the board meeting page from October 12th on their website. They have responses to comments submitted during the public comment period, including Dana's, as well as a separate letter from BBCAG, Sarah Johnson. So
Can you send us a link to that, Adrian, if you have
sure,
it? Thank
I
you.
can do that. I would share it in the chat if I didn't have to be having my notes on the phone right now. So I'll send it after the fact. And then I did have one last one that I had a slide for. A few weeks ago, I went to Sustainable San Mateo County's 2022 Indicators Report meeting at Genentech. They were focused on building electrification, had some really great speakers. If you're interested in checking that out, you can see the link there on the screen to access that report. They've got a really good 12, 20, something like that page focused just on building electrification specifically, and then a whole bunch of other metrics on sustainability issues across the county. And I think everything else on my list is for subcommittee item.
Things are also.
And I left one off because I wasn't sure if Rachel wanted to report on building efficiency.
Sure. We are continuing to prepare for next year's cycle. Next year will be not only the annual benchmarking report, but also for the first time, buildings will need to show that they're high performing, or they'll need to undergo an audit and make improvements to energy and water. And that will be happening starting next year for commercial buildings only. So Adrian and I are prepping some outreach materials for that, and then updating our webpage, and then also preparing on the compliance side what our processes are going to look like. And then we do still have 2 lingering buildings who have not submitted anything for this last cycle. So Adrian sent out our 3rd round of citations yesterday. And I think that's mostly it.
Shauna, did you have a question?
Well, yeah. If these buildings have a 3rd round of citations, have they just ignored the first 2, or what's the?
They have ignored the first 2, each of which they have 30 days to respond to. That came after a notice of violations that they had 30 days to respond to, that only came 3 months after the deadline, and multiple reminders.
So what's
So they're just ignoring it. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any repercussions for them ignoring the 3rd citation?
I will be honest, I didn't expect to get to much. I didn't expect to get to the 3rd citation. So I'm not sure where we go from here. We will.
OSEC to have a peaceful protest in the storefront.
I don't know about that. There is a fine associated with the citation, of course, and we do have a public dashboard that indicates that they are not in compliance. So, there's some, hopefully, PR perspective for them, and a small monetary fine.
Adrian?
Yes, Randy, go
Hi,
ahead.
it's Randy. Yeah, so now that we've reached the 3rd citation, whatever fines period we've given them, they get a $500 citation for every period thereafter that they remain non-compliant.
And then is the death penalty on the table after that?
I'm not going to comment on that considering my background.
Does that get added on to say a business license fee that they have to pay in the for the city or something like that? I mean, you know, like
No, the citation is a direct violation for their non-compliance.
Mhm. So I mean, like if I have a lot of parking tickets when I go to renew my license, they add all that on to my my registration fee. Is there any kind of thing that's like that with the city and companies that are that far out of compliance?
I'm not sure I understand the analogy you're trying to draw there. What we do is we have a processing company that we ask them to go after and collect each and every citation we've issued. So with the occurrence of a company that's on their third violation, they've received a citation for $100, $200, and now they're on $500. We'll continue to issue those. If they don't comply with that, we will eventually put a lien on the property.
Okay, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I assume we are good to move on to subcommittee report. CAP subcommittee, we covered a good chunk of it with our earlier new business item. Does anybody on the subcommittee want to add anything about our recent meeting? Okay, hearing none. Event? Oh, I actually do have something for this. Well, I could take it here or under calendar items, but Jeff from Park and Rec was asking about dates for the Earth Day event next year because they are working on the spring activity guide. It turns out that Earth Day, April 22nd, is in fact on Saturday next year. There will probably be a good amount of competition for events that day, but it seems like it would make the most sense for us to have our event on Earth Day, since it's an Earth Day event. Assuming that worked for Ariel. I have not heard back from him, but I just emailed him today about that.
Sounds good to me. Let's schedule it.
Woohoo!
And then I'm, basically deferring to Ariel on locations, but if anybody has other suggestions, certainly welcome to entertain those as well.
Next case. Are we on education?
Education and outreach. I don't know if it's time to re-up the library presentation, the library display. I would imagine so.
Probably.
Okay.
Baylands?
Yeah, anything new on the Baylands?
No, I have not been. There has not been any meetings scheduled, and if so, they've been canceled.
Open space plan.
I am so excited that the city, the council approved the 6 acres or 6 parcels to be included in the priority preservation area. And personally, I'm working on a parcel with a landowner to try and get that dedicated. And at this point, I think that we should review the open space plan and see the next area that we want to work on. So maybe in the spring, we'll schedule a meeting to review the overall open space plan, not just the acres, and see the next area that we should focus on.
And I can confirm that letters were just recently sent out to those new parcels that were added.
Thank you, Karen. I'm excited about that.
Anything on the Crocker Frog Trail?
Have we received any correspondence or, I guess, consultant bids from the folks we spoke to?
They did send us an email, Adrian, and said that something should be coming soon, and it was mid-November, like in the last week or two, that they realized that it had, dropped on their priority list, but they had not forgot about us and were going to send us their scope, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we can reach
about as
out
much
to
as
them
I can.
and shake them up a little bit. And in the meanwhile, I know that Paul Buscal has continued to work on the frog and habitat area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, that's great.
I helped him a little bit a couple weeks ago, and if we shake up the committees at all, if anybody wanted to let me make a spot on there, I'm passionate about that now. So if anyone was tired of it for a little while, I would do it for another year.
You know what?
Yeah.
You mean like subcommittee changes?
I mean, yeah, I would be on that one if someone wanted to rotate around, because I love getting my hands physically on it, and I worked on a little with Paul, and I could help.
You know, Jason, I'd be happy to rotate out of that if you want to take a slot there.
Yeah,
Is
and
it,
then I
is
can
it appropriate?
I can irritate Karen.
Is it appropriate we do that now, or is that okay?
Generally, we have it on the agenda when we're going to be doing subcommittee reorganization, but we could potentially add that back on next time.
Okay.
Cool.
Folks are agreeable with
But
that.
I'm passionate, Michelle. I'll get on this and I'll
I know you will.
make
I love
Karen's life miserable. And
No, you can't make Karen's life
no,
miserable.
I won't.
Save
No.
little frog lives. That's what you need to do.
Yes, I'll be charming about it. Yes.
Invasive species.
So we talked about that at the last meeting, and I guess we are at the point to try to, well, I am still gathering what it's going to cost to do city properties, and then I guess we should meet again to kind of talk about what we want to recommend in terms of city versus private. We talked about a couple of options, city versus private being on a different schedule, or bigger and smaller being on a different schedule potentially. So I'll do that, and then we'll set up a meeting and be able to move that along once that'll kind of finalize the recommendation.
Okay.
Anything on dark skies?
A good meeting with staff. I think they decided they would kind of look through and figure out what they thought was enforceable and what they wanted to move forward with us, and come back with some feedback, and then we go back to the table. So I think we're waiting on staff. Yeah.
I think that's right. We're waiting on staff. They're going to review it. Then we're going to do it. Right, Rachel?
I thought we were waiting on.
Adrian, we can't hear you.
How about now?
I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Now.
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry, I moved my mic up to take a drink of water. The planning staff sent Rachel and I their comments a couple days ago, last week. And so Rachel and I are just starting to, well, Rachel maybe has had more time to look through them. I haven't had much time yet, but we're going to be talking about them tomorrow, I think, actually. And I think our subcommittee has a meeting on the book in the next week or two, definitely before the holidays. So we'll be bringing their feedback back to the subcommittee that meeting.
Adrian, send it to both my email addresses because I don't have a password yet for my back again.
I don't think I have anything to send you right now, but I do recommend you send a request to Ingrid to work on that right away, because we need to move OSEC business to the city emails.
Yeah, I get that. It's just I don't want to miss a meeting.
Go ahead.
So Adrian, speaking about that, I don't know what is wrong with this computer, and I don't know how soon I can get it fixed. And it's all dialed in so that I can get into my Brisbane city email. I may be on the phone for the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee meeting on Wednesday or on Monday, sorry. So I'm going to ask if you would please send me the Zoom link to my Gmail address. I will work on this and try to fix it, but it's really crazy time of the semester and I don't know how soon the IT people at state will be able to get to it. So could you please make an exception for me and send me the Zoom link to my Gmail address for the CAP meeting?
I will try to remember to do that. I will say not every subcommittee meeting is going to be this case, but CAP subcommittees are publicly noticed. So CAP subcommittee links and OSEC links, those are all posted on the city's website. You should always be able to access them there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I'm going to make a plug that both Glenn and Michelle's issues would be greatly mitigated if they had their forwarding turned on. They wouldn't be able to reply from their personal email account, but they'd get the links and the attachment.
Oh, okay.
Here. It all comes right to my Gmail from the city one. So get that turned on. Your problems are over.
Well, no,
Aaron,
you still need to
I
get
will
back into your city one
contact
to
you
respond.
for that. Right, tutelage. We missed that opportunity. Let's do that. I need help.
I'll email it to you again.
Yeah, Luddites unite. What can I say?
All right. So have we included the dark skies?
Yeah.
issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And are we
3 issues.
3 issues? Yeah.
We have not met, but we've made some good small steps getting the handout for Day in the Park. I know that was early last month. Some of the street trees in town that were removed are getting replaced 2 at a time. They're getting ordered and I'm getting updates from maintenance staff about those, getting those coordinated. We're continuing with deep root watering, watching the weather. They agreed to go look on not the main streets and go up the residential streets in central Brisbane over the past few weeks and water ones that they observed to be in distress. We put an article in the Blast, right, about water your tree if it's in distress, and maintain your tree. So taking those little steps. I don't know if committee members have thoughts about. Obviously, I'm sure you guys want to meet and talk about the bigger picture.
So, Karen, can we schedule a meeting for like somewhere around mid-January? Early January?
Yeah. And are we, let's see, this is now Shauna, Barbara, and Michelle, so evening.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
6:15 or after?
I'm laid off January, so I can do anytime, any day, right?
I can only do after 5 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. So what, 5 being right after 5 or 5:30 or?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
What's another Zoom meeting in the day?
Right.
And I actually had a slightly adjacent question. I'm not sure if this is part of the 3 issues or not. So what is the plan for the replacement grow to be? Is there a time frame on that?
You can ask that here. That fits. And it's a good question. I have been working with the maintenance team leader, and he has been completely unable to find the species of Douglas fir tree at 5 or 6 up to 10 feet tall anywhere in the Western US. He's found there, I'd have to look at my notes, 3 or 4 feet tall. And I check in with him every 2 weeks and I'm looking, Karen, I'm contacting people, brokers, nurseries, and I'm using my resources that are tree people. And we finally came up with, I was like, plant them small and protect them, or bring them to the courtyard and grow them to a reasonable height to plant them. Get us these 3 trees, even if they are 3 feet tall now.
So I'm not sure if the fellow who owned Creekside Tree Farm is still a viable option, but we could.
He made contact with him. I think he did. And thank you for asking. I don't remember.
Okay, so that still might
me
be a
see if I
viable alternative. to
Thought
getting
he-
the trees.
Thought he had retired or.
Well, he's very old. He might be dead by now, but I hope not. And he would actually give us the trees. We would just have to harvest them and transplant them, which is what we were going to do originally and didn't, which we should have done, but we didn't.
Because this is prime planting season, whether we're putting them in a bucket, and it's a bigger, whether we're moving them up or we're actually putting them in the ground. Here we are in the middle before things get super cold, but
It's not happening before Christmas.
The
No.
contact Michelle had only had Douglas fir that was 15 feet tall. Even if he had the equipment to dig it up, he did not recommend it. He felt that it would not do well if it were to be dug up and replanted. They do better container grown and then planted. He also said purchasing one that is balled and burlapped would be okay.
And that's who said that?
That was our maintenance team leader contacting your Creekside farm.
Okay.
That was October 20th. That's why I forgot. Oh, that was
Okay.
before our last meeting.
Okay.
Apologies.
cool. Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for following up with that.
Yeah, so I'll let you know whether I think he was leaning towards putting them in the courtyard in containers and growing them to a suitable height before planting them.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah Point Park Planning.
Unfortunately, there was a meeting and I missed it because it came to my new email address, and I think I had set up my new email address, but I had not gotten in the habit of checking it regularly. So I apologize for dropping the ball on that one. And I will try and figure out what happened at the last meeting that I missed.
Thank
Oops.
you. And Lippman Science Fair judging.
Oh, that's coming up. I need to send out my annual emails to Bob Detmer and the science director up at Lippman.
Yeah, I knew that this was gonna probably be our last meeting, almost 2 months until the next meeting. So I added this, but I think you're still probably early, but
Yeah.
was my way of reminding you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That concludes subcommittees and calendar items.
So this is just our year that's wrapping up, and we've got just a lot of things penciled in right now for next year. And we'll start filling in the details as things approach. Not a whole lot to say, I think, at this point in time, unless anybody has any questions or suggestions.
Good, and we'll keep us posted as things change, I assume. Great.
Okay.
Yay.
I love this picture. Love it.
the-
Love it. Love it.
We don't have everybody, so I didn't want to make this permanent one, but since I didn't have everybody's headshot quite yet, this seemed like a good stand-in for a month.
Oh, that's nice.
I was right next door and I didn't get invited to be in this picture,
Oh,
but I guess I wasn't at your booth, so.
Day in the park was really good, you guys. I just was so sweet. It really was. Thank you, Adrian, for all your work on that, because I know you were a real shaker mover. And I have a huge spinnaker that I freaking don't know what to do with. If anybody wants some sailcloth, let me know.
Oh, I think we'll be doing those same little sailboats next year, so hold on to it.
I had a lot of corks that I brought home.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We have to do the sailboats for the next 10 years for me to get rid of this spinnaker, Jason.
Yeah, well, it's
God.
cool. It's cool. We're redoing. Okay, next meeting. What about next meeting? I want to eat. I haven't eaten yet.
I haven't either.
January
January
25th. Yay.
Okay, everyone have a wonderful,
2023.
safe holiday season. Think good thoughts.
Adjourn.
Try to stay healthy.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
stay healthy.
Stay
Yes.
healthy.
Thank you.
Wash your hands with soap
Happy
and water,
holidays.
then wash your face.
Thank you.
Okay,
you.
take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Adjourn. Ah.